Confluence and 3 copies of Evolving Wilds sort of keynote what you were just alluding to. The mana here is not ideal, but very aggressive, very powerful curve of creatures here for Aaron.
He'll be playing against Carl Hinkie, Jeskai Tokens, a more traditional deck there from Carl. Last time we did see Barich in the feature match area was with Mana Confluence, as that's how he's going to begin things here in Houston, and a Warden of the First Tree. But he was actually making the top 4 of the Open Series in Richmond during Season 4 last year before losing to Shaheen Sarani. Shaheen ended up losing the finals of that tournament to Harlan Fear. Harlan Fear is actually one of the players that put Jeskai Tokens on the map. So we've kind of come full circle here as Hinkie just plays a mountain and passes the tournament. Barich's going to sacrifice a Wooded Foothills. Looks like he's going to pump the Ward.
So Warden of the First Tree is a card that's kind of gotten a bit of a pedigree here recently, featured in Andrew Boswell's successful build of Abzan Aggro, also a key player in Joe Bernal's regional winning deck, and a card he spoke very highly of.
Looks like it's going to be a Fleecemane Lion instead, so the Warden's just going to come in here for 1 point of damage. A good start here for Barich, though. A 1-drop and a 2-drop, both of those cards very, very powerful. And for Hinkie, he's going to get something on the board. To be fair, Jeskai Tokens typically starts on turn 3.
Though that was a bit of a risky play there last turn from Aaron. If Carl had access to Raise the Alarm, he would have been able to block and take care of the Warden in kind of a trivial fashion. Probably would have been better served attacking first and then playing the Fleecemane Lion post-combat.
This is a Monastery Mentor, one of the big cards from Fate Reforged, still looking kind of get its feet set a little bit, I think. I think the power level of this card, undeniable, but not exactly sure what the best home is for it.
Yeah, it seems like it fits in most naturally into some sort of build of Jeskai Tokens, but it's a very open-ended card. There's a lot of ways to enable it, and as you mentioned, players still kind of wrapping their head around it.
And take a look at Barich's hand. He does have a Wooded Foothills, a Shaman of the Great Hunt, chained to the rocks. Looks like a Fanatic of Xenagos as well. He's looking to figure out how he wants to go by attacking here. He's going to start with just attacking with both creatures. No blocks here from Hinkie, as there wouldn't be any good ones available. Barich will sacrifice his Wooded Foothills, go a little bit lower. We'll see what he wants to play after combat.
Very important for him to get the Mentor off the table right now if he can. To that end, he does have some copies of Chain of the Rocks in his deck, but lacking removal otherwise.
Yeah, Valor Stance is not going to get the job done against that card. He does have 3 copies of that, however. He also has 3 copies of Become Immense and 3 copies of Gather Courage. Here is a Chain of the Rocks, as he does fetch up a mountain with the Foothills, so that will take care of the Monastery Mentor. As you mentioned, very important to get that off of the table. And now it looks to be just a passing of the turn back to Hinkie.
And again, this is another curious sequence here from Aaron, who could have just done that pre-combat and then pumped the Warden. I'm curious if he's holding on. Oh, I suppose he actually lacks the second white mana.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
This is a Hordeling Outburst. So 3 Goblin tokens will be on the way here.
Just always assume with these hybrid mana cards that they can just activate it all the time.
Yeah,
but
it feels like very, very Figure of Destiny-esque.
Right, and with Boswell's deck in the previous week, that was certainly the case.
A Wild Slash is going to go after one of the First Tree, but a Gather Courage will take care of that. If you do remember watching Aaron play in Richmond, had multiple copies of Gather Courage in his deck, a card that he is definitely fond of. It's something that players generally just don't play around.
No, and it has opportunities to be very, very good in combat, attacking and blocking, because it can be free when you're blocking with something like Heir of the Wilds, Fleecemane Lion, or any other green creature.
A 4th land here for Barich. Does have a copy of Shaman of the Great Hunt in hand, but he's just going to start by attacking. Fanatic of Xenagos as well. Last card is Heir of the Wild, so 3 cards left here for Aaron. We'll see how Carl wants to block, if he wants to at all. Warden's going to pump. So now it's become a 3-3. And Warden was a card that, when we watched Boswell a lot in Washington, D.C., very impressive.
Especially for his list, and it may be, in fact, even better in Aaron's list, even though the colored mana situation makes it a little bit sketchier. Just because his deck has fewer lands that come into play tapped. The Abzan deck still has to play a good number of scry lands and tri-lands and so forth to facilitate its mana. Aaron here not doing that, so he has a lot of lands that come to play untapped, and it's much smoother for him to curve out.
Well, Carl will draw a card. 3 Goblins back on defense. Does have a copy of Jeskai Charm in hand. He's going to assess the situation before moving forward. A couple of lands over there as well here for Carl. We'll start by playing one of them in Shivan Reef. And just pass the turn back, so a boring turn there for the Jeskai Tokens deck. It's capable of quite a few powerful things, but nothing doing so far.
None of the big payoff cards so far. No Treasure Cruise, no Ascendancy, and not really effective at blocking these creatures because they're so large.
Those goblins look like they may be on chump blocking duty. Here's a Fnatic as Xenagos pre-combat. So Barich will ask the question as far as tribute is concerned. And we'll see what Hinkie wants to do about it.
I assume, given how under duress Carl is right now, that he has to just give Aaron a 4/4.
Not something you love to do, but it seems like something he's going to have to do. Can't forget the Fnatic tramples as well, so having a 4/4 trampler against this board is pretty good. Carl going to take a look.
The last card is in his hand here. He has a Jeskai Charm, 1 copy of that in his main deck, and an Outpost Siege, 1 copy here as well.
That's a card that's picking up in popularity. Here are the attackers. So he does allow the Fnatic to have haste. And now it's time to block because, well, if he doesn't, he's dead.
Yes.
So he wants to set things up. But he is in a really, really rough spot right now, and that doesn't even include the fact that Aaron does have a Shaman of the Great Hunt in his hand.
And I suspect here Carl's going to have to use the Jeskai Charm to put something on top. It's very hard for him to block and use the +1/+1 power because there's too many 3 toughness creatures in play. If there was another 2/2, let's say, I think Carl might want to go double block one of the 3/3s or 4/4s, put something in front of a 2/2, and then use the +1/+1 in lifelink mode on Jeskai Charm. But Aaron's creatures are just too large to make that an effective play right now.
Yeah, this is a really tough spot because I could see a block where, Goblin Token goes in front of Heir of the Wilds, but that's not even going to work very well because that's a 3/3 now, too.
Yeah.
So in most cases, it would be a 2/2. So Carl is in a pretty bad spot no matter how he blocks here.
It makes the Fnatic even more significant. I mean, it's a big haste attacker with trample and is increasing the size of Heir of the Wilds, which is very awkward for the Jeskai Charm in Carl's hand in multiple ways.
Jeskai Charm is going to be cast here in just a moment. So the question is, what mode will he be using? And we will be able to figure that out in just a second, depending on if a creature goes on top or if it doesn't.
It looks like
very clear.
It looks like Carl is just taking care of the Fleece main line here and trying to gain 6.
Okay. So he'll undo some of the damage that is dealt by some of the creatures, but he's just making up small ground. Not a big exchange that's favorable there.
Yeah, and it's still net positive for Aaron that turn. It's not even like Carl's higher than he was before combat started.
Yeah.
Carl traded 1 for 1. Aaron still has a very developed board. So not a bad turn for Aaron there, even though Carl did have a trick inside of combat.
Jeskai Ascendancy, the draw. But it's a little late to the party right now. A card that can typically dominate a game. It'll be hard for it to dominate this one. Looks like he's going to deploy it. So the Ascendancy is in play. And now just a passing of the turn. We're going to go back Barich's way. Barich will quickly untap, take a draw. Become Immense is what he's picked up. 4 cards in the graveyard, so that'll be a cheap one of those. Does have to think a little bit here. With 2 mana available there for Hinkie, Hinkie can be bluffing a card like Wild Slash, Raise the Alarm.
There's some danger here. Lightning Strike 2 would be very bad if Aaron tries to go to the unblocked creature for the kill. But you also don't want to give Carl a lot of time with the Ascendancy in play because that card can very easily turn a game around.
Here's the attack with everybody.
Here's the thing, though. You probably would have seen the Lightning Strike last turn. And there's been numerous opportunities for Carl to cast the Ascendancy.
Well, Barich's not willing to make a move. Just going to let his creatures win in combat. Follow up with a copy of Heir of the Wilds, pass the turn back. Hinkie at 1. And I kind of like the sequencing here by Aaron, not really willing to make a move because at this point, the card that he can really only lose to, I feel like, is End Hostilities, and then he has a haste start afterward with Shaman of the Great Hunt.
Yeah.
So he's kind of got every avenue covered at this point. There's no real reason for him to make a big push on anything.
He could have gone for a kill there. The evidence suggested that Carl did not have any interaction, but there's no reason to risk it because Aaron had such a commanding position, and as you mentioned, had an out to the best card that Carl could have followed up with, which was End Hostilities.
Aaron Barich does win game number 1 here over Carl Hinkie. I aggro up a game over Jeskai Tokens. We turn our attention to the sideboard. We will start with Hinkie and his Jeskai deck. What's he got?
3 copies of Disdainful Stroke, 2 copies of Erase, 2 copies of Negate, a Valorous Stance, 2 copies of End Hostilities, and Elspeth's Sun's Champion. a Dig Through Time, a Glare of Heresy, an Outpost Siege, and an Anger of the Gods. I really like converting into a control deck here from Carl's side of the table, so I like bringing in the Anger of the Gods, the 2 copies of End Hostilities, the Elspeth, the Glare of Heresy, and maybe even to that end bringing in something like Dig Through Time to make him more of a firm control deck. But I think in this matchup, he's very well suited with more removal, more sweepers, and his Elspeth as a way to win the game.
Take a look at Barich's sideboard. You'll find 3 copies of Wild Slash, an additional copy of Gather Courage. He's got 3 in the main, 1 on the board, 2 Arc Lightnings, 3 Glare of Heresy, 2 Outpost Siege, 2 Xenagos the Reveler, and then 2 copies of Destructive Revelry. I would assume he wants some number of Wild Slashes just because he saw Monastery Mentor. I'm not saying he needs to board up to the full amount, but this doesn't seem like a matchup where Valor's stance is very good, so I think he wants to swap those out for something.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the Glare of Heresies are justifiable to bring in because it's good against the white creatures and the card Jeskai Ascendancy. I think Xenagos the Reveler is not bad in this matchup. It's not like it gets trumped by the green creatures like Caryatid and Courser Crufix. That's one of the big problems with Xenagos in this format. But Jeskai Tokens doesn't have a clean out to it in quite the same way, so Xenagos can pretty good. And I think that Outpost Siege could be good in this matchup as well. I think Aaron wants to be less all in on just a curve of creatures and pump spells because Carl's post board is likely to have more removal spells, more planeswalkers, and things to try to trip up that game plan. So if Aaron can kind of take a different dimension of attack, I think either mode on Outpost Siege at various points could be powerful for him in the matchup.
Player's going to shuffle up here for game number 2. Will be underway in just a moment, but we will take a look at our Season 1 schedule here. We're in Houston right now. As we mentioned at the top of the show, there's not a lot left. You see Los Angeles next weekend. We got our Open Series in Baltimore after that, our first Modern Open Series event with the Pro Tour results. That should be interesting to watch.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Modern looks to be in a very healthy place right now. A lot of different decks going on. Power level format looks relatively flat. Should be a lot of fun to cover.
We'll go to Miami after that for our standard Grand Prix. You can go over to StarCityGames.com for more information about that. Should be a fantastic event. We'll wrap it up in Dallas and fire off in Richmond with a standard Open Series and a standard Legacy Invitational. You, me, and Matthias for our Season 1 Invitational, first one of the year, where we're going to punch 2 invites to the 2015 Players Championship.
And somehow my first opportunity to go to Richmond for an Open Series, even though we typically go there once or twice a year. Don't know how I've missed it so far, but that will be my first time.
You will love it. You want to know why?
Why?
They have a champs there.
Perfect.
So you will love it. And good guy that I am, this is on the record. It's on me.
Okay.
I'll take care of you when we go. Because that's what friends do.
That is, I don't have a response to that. We aren't going there. We are not going there.
We talked briefly about Outpost Siege being within both of these players' decks. You want to talk about a card that's picking up in popularity.
Well, both, I mean, it seems pretty well suited for Jeskai Tokens because it's a deck that wants to play offense in certain spots and defense in certain spots. And Outpost Siege is a pretty flexible way of doing that. I think it, the analog, I guess, is Chandra. That's a pretty close parallel, but can't be attacked and can't be targeted by Hero's Downfall.
Yeah, that was the analog that everyone made right at the beginning is just, isn't this card just worse than Chandra? I'd rather have the Planeswalker that stays in play, but Outpost Siege, especially the Dragons portion of that card, has really proven itself to be something quite powerful in this format. A lot of players have been talking about just how good it's been for them. Yep. Also, I think the 1 red in the mana cost as opposed to 2 certainly helps this card as well.
For sure. I mean, a lot of decks are looking to just touch a little bit of red. It can be awkward to try to facilitate double red, but for me, it's more about, it's a source of card advantage that can't be attacked or killed by most of the removal that's available in the format.
Hinkie going to start with a Mystic Monastery and a Temple. Barich with just a Windswept Heath right now. He'll play a Forest, crack the Heath. We'll see a Plains. And I imagine a creature coming as well here in just a moment for Aaron. Aaron, a streamer, likes to test out these 3-color aggressive decks with the shaky mana, to try to figure out if he can get ways to make the mana work. We've seen him have success with it. Again, 4 Open Series top 8s, a win in Dallas in 2013, top 4 at SCG Richmond during Season 4 last year. Beat Brad Nelson in a fantastic match, one of the best of SCG Live moments, as here's a Jeskai Ascendancy from Hinkie. And Barich's going to try to keep it going. Here is a Mountain.
And this is the test. Does Aaron have one of his sideboarded glares?
He doesn't have that, but he does have a Goblin Rabblemaster, and that's not a bad question to ask right now.
I mean, this is not a bad consolation prize here for Aaron, but Carl's going to go into his turn at a relatively high life total and Ascendancy in play, and if the leftovers in his hand are anything of substance, I think he may be able to take over this game in short order.
Lightning Strike's not a bad draw. That'll take care of the Rabblemaster. Here's 3 mana. Hordeling Outburst isn't bad either. So going to trigger the Ascendancy. Time to draw and discard. Treasure Cruise in hand as well right now.
And a lot of removal by the looks of things in Carl's hand.
The discarding of a Wild Slash is notable.
Yeah. Opponent with Rebel Master in play, discard Shock.
Yeah.
Okay.
How good is your hand, sir? There is a Stoke the Flames over there. Now, activating Ascendancy, as powerful it is, it can be difficult at times. So willing to discard the Wild Slash there. I mean, he has a Stoke the Flames. Also has a Lightning Strike, Treasure Cruise too. So hand is definitely quite good here for Hinkie.
And just trying to punk Aaron out in combat here. Have Aaron make a play that's a little bit too aggressive. I don't know if he's necessarily going to allow Aaron to move into combat here.
Aaron's going to start with the Chain of the Rocks because this breaks up Stoke the Flames.
Yeah, it forces Carl's hand right now. So at least Aaron will have the information moving into combat about whether or not he needs to play around it.
Yeah. And casting Chain of the Rocks on a Goblin token isn't the sexiest play in the world, but it's one that kind of gets the job done right now.
Yep. Although this is another, some of the power that comes from Jeskai tokens, there's a mixture of creatures and token strategies in the deck. And so the anti-token cards aren't necessarily good against the creatures and vice versa, and often you're just caught with the wrong reactive card in your hand for the wrong spot. This is a very good example of Aaron having to use a Chain of the Rocks on a lone token.
Stoke the Flames takes care of Goblin Rebel Master. Those tokens out there are 2/2s right now. Here comes Fleece Mainline. Barich known for having pump spells in his deck, so this does make for an interesting attack, and it looks like he does have a copy of Gather Courage in hand. So he wants Carl to double block here.
Wild Slash as well, so he's got a lot of good action against a double block here.
There is your double block. I suppose the question is, which card do you use, the Slash or the Gather Courage? Looks like he's leaning towards Gather Courage.
Yeah, Aaron wants to protect himself from something like Monastery Mentor or Seeker of the Way, which would be really problematic right now given that there's an Ascendancy in play.
There is a Lightning Strike, but that's kind of the backside of using Gather Courage to get those creatures off the table versus Wild Slash. Lightning Strike is able to take care of the Fleece Main line there. Of course, an Ascendancy trigger. Carl, at this point, there's just a lone Goblin on the table, not really underneath any pressure, so now seems about as good a time as any to do this.
Yep. Good spot to cruise.
Ascendancy trigger, so a little draw and discard action. There goes a Shivan Reef. Treasure Cruise is going to resolve. 3 cards coming in for Hinkie. An island. A Temple of Epiphany. Looks like a negate as well. There is the temple, so it's time to scry. Top card. Gonna go to the bottom. Hinkie's done.
And, like I mentioned several turns ago, Carl was going to be able to go into his turn at 16 with an Ascendancy in play, not facing down too much of a board. He has flooded out a little bit, but you can see his hand of Wild Slash and End Hostility. He's got a lot of protection if Aaron decides to go small or big here. And the Ascendancy just provides such powerful inevitability.
Aaron picks up a copy of Goblin Rabble Master. So this is going to be kind of the true test for Aaron. His deck is kind of new at this point. I'm sure he's familiar with it. He plays a lot of Magic online, plays a lot of Magic in general. But, for us watching the booth, you guys watching at home, Naya Aggro is not something we see a lot of. So we'll see how we can stand up to a Jeskai Tokens deck, a deck that people are very familiar with. It has cards like End Hostilities and Lightning Strike and a lot of removal for creatures. Can he kind of go toe-to-toe with this card-drawing engine that Jeskai has on the table right now? He's going to start with the Shaman of the Great Hunt.
Again, this is all, this is a fair amount of damage. This is not a bad turn here for Aaron, but Carl just doesn't have bad draw steps for the rest of the game because the Ascendancy cleans up everything.
The Shaman, of course, a 4/2 with haste. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, including the Shaman, +1/+1 counters, and if you get to activate the Ferocious, it's a good clean living. Doesn't happen a ton. So you look at it as maybe a 4/2 haster that becomes a 5/3, but Hostility is going to get that and the Goblin token off the board, and Ascendancy trigger, and just a passing of the turn.
And if that was Aaron's, last big punch right there, he will be hard pressed to come back, I think.
We'll see what he can find after he sacrifices his Windswept. He's going to get a land out of his deck, search up the plains. So 1 mountain, 2 forests, 2 plains in Barich's hand. He'll draw cards, copy of Mana Confluence. Does have a Rabble Master as backup, so he'll deploy that. Trigger? Absolutely not. There's a Wild Slash. Carl's got a trigger, that's for sure. No trigger is Ascendancy. Did draw a copy of End Hostilities. Might have some interest in actually discarding that, but he's going to go with something else. He'll go with his Wild Slash.
Yeah, he has a Hordling Outburst in his hand as well, so a really stocked hand. I kind of like keeping the Hordling Outburst to do something proactive to try to finish the game, and keeping the End Hostilities as insurance in case something weird sneaks through.
Break in case of emergency.
Exactly. You could imagine something like Stormbreath Dragon being in Aaron's deck, and right now, Carl, if he were to discard the End Hostilities, wouldn't have an answer, so not a bad insurance policy.
Well, he just has. So 3 Goblin tokens are in play. Did discard End Hostilities. Presumably 2 other spells in his hand. And there's a Soulfire Grandmaster.
1 copy here in Carl's list. And this is the spot where it actually could be good this game. He's got a lot of mana, the game's dragged out, and there's a lot of cheap spells in Carl's deck.
Barich with the Glare of Heresy. A little late to the party, but better late than never, I suppose. There's a Wild Slash to take care of the Grandmaster, and all right, maybe got a little bit of a game brewing now.
For sure. I mean, it requires a big draw and for that to not happen. But yeah, no, that was a really good turn for Aaron there. If Carl did not have Treasure Cruise as backup, that could have been a turning point.
Treasure Cruise drew 3 spells, 2 Seeker of the Ways, and a Stoke the Flames. There's a land. You see the attack with the 3 goblins. See if Carl wants to deploy these Seekers. Yeah, he will. Pass the turn back. Barich will draw. Warden of the First Tree, a pretty powerful card, but this is the difference between Aaron's deck and what Boswell was playing. It's just much harder for Aaron to actually be able to turn this into its largest mode.
Yeah, he's definitely skipping on that. I think it's more in the deck as just a, student of warfare, basically.
Yeah. Stoke the Flames will take care of the Warden. Here come the attacks. Can't forget that the Prowess did trigger on the Seekers. So they're 3/3s that are gaining 3 life. A Temple is the follow-up there for Hinkie. And I got a feeling, my friend, we'll be headed to a 3rd game here in just
Looks
a moment.
that way. I don't think Aaron has any sweepers, and I would be surprised if he brought him in even if he had him.
Carl Hinkie's going to win game number 2 here over Aaron Barich. Jeskai Tokens will even it up against Naya Aggro as we get ready for game number 3. That's the power of Jeskai Ascendancy.
Power of Jeskai Ascendancy. Also, I think the end hostilities that are in Carl's sideboard here are very potent in this matchup.
Yeah, we see that be able to convert to a control deck a high percentage of the time. I think that's a sideboard that most players lean towards. And for Aaron's deck, especially when he's on the draw, and hostilities is quite good against him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So him being on the play will change some things, and I imagine it will change his sideboard a little bit too, as you see him kind of going back to the drawing board, and Carl's going to do the same thing. I don't know if he's going to still leave in cards like Gather Courage or if he still has Become Immense in his deck. I think that Valorous Stance is probably out of his deck. I imagine now that he's seen a card like an Hostilities, maybe the Zendikos, maybe the Outpost Sieges, they're in the deck now.
I think so too. I think that Gather Courage is still fine in this matchup because it's so efficient at fizzling damage-based removal. I think something like Become Immense is more questionable because it's not that efficient at fizzling removal, and if Carl is overloading on removal spells, you don't want to have your wave of creatures killed and then be left with pump spells in hand. I agree with you, Valorous Stance stands out as something that just needs to go.
Doesn't seem great.
No targets really in Carl's deck, and it's not that efficient at fizzling removal. I think Gather Courage is still fine, even with Carl overloading on removal.
Well, game number 3 will be underway here in just a moment. We will take a look at our Season 2 schedule here on the Open Series. Season 1 is almost done, so Season 2, very shortly, will be underway.
Yep, and we start off in Syracuse, then Providence and Seattle, Cleveland and Seattle for all standard opens here. Cleveland and Seattle, nice back-to-back weekends for you as your hometown previous and your hometown current will be on the schedule. Past the Seattle Open, we have Dallas again on the schedule, then a Legacy Open in Worcester, Massachusetts, and then the Season 2 Invitational in Columbus, Ohio will be attached to the Origins Game Fair, which is a very large gaming convention. Modern and Standard will be the formats for the Invitational with a Modern Open Series attached, June 5th through 7th with me, you, and Matthias in the booth.
That's going to be one of the more fun tournaments to watch because we don't see a lot of Modern on the Open Series, so, we can kind of identify what players are going to play in their respective formats between Standard and Legacy because we see them so often. But what are the Modern decks that Jim Davis and Joe Lissette and Jerry Thompson, Brad Nelson, Todd Anderson, what are those guys going to play? I have no idea.
I'm really interested about both Columbus and the Baltimore Open that's coming up in a few weeks because, as you mentioned, a lot of our grinders for the SCG Open Series, they're going to focus primarily on Standard and Legacy. This is the first time where Modern's been in full force in 2015. And for a lot of those players, if they focus primarily on the SCG Open Series, Modern may be a bit of a blind spot. So I'm curious to see what kind of decks those players play.
And there are definitely some Modern specialists out there. Jacob Wilson, I think of Sam Pardee, I think of Josh McClain and a handful of other players. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what kind of approach the players on the Open Series do take in Baltimore. Yeah, I think that's the big one. That should be a lot of fun to watch. Our first Modern Open Series event then. And, the race is certainly going to be really interesting to watch. Jim Davis currently has a big lead. Joe Lissette is capable of winning an Open Series event as he proved in Columbus already this year. So things could really tighten up.
Yeah, no, I think that Baltimore it's going to be a really exciting event to watch and to cover. There's going to be a lot of unknown information. I think a lot of players are probably going to gravitate towards playing some of the Pro Tour decks, but you never know. There's a bunch of different decks available in Modern.
You could be covering a lot of burn matches that weekend.
It is possible.
And Evolving Wilds is where we'll start things here for game number 3. Aaron will sacrifice that after Carl does play a Mystic Monastery.
I think it's more likely that I cover a lot of core Firewalkers and timely reinforcements, but possible I'll be covering some burn.
That's still a burn match.
Yep. It's
Technically,
true.
that's still a burn match, just not the way I think you'd like it to go. Though, I can imagine you getting a little happy seeing the burn player overcome those hate cards.
I think that timely reinforcements you can overcome with Skullcrack. Core Firewalker is really rough.
Get your pirate spell bombs. Dial them up.
You can start playing Chain to the Rocks. No reason not to. You have a bunch of mountains and you're already splashing white.
Problem solved.
Just giving out tech here.
What are we even talking about?
Right.
Problem solved. Heir of the Wilds. That's how Barich will start things on turn number 2. See what Carl has for his second turn. Perhaps a Wild Slash? Absolutely. Little wary, I think, of Gather Courage there. This is what he was thinking about.
Yeah, no, he's seen it. He has to respect it. There's a very good chance Aaron's left it in.
Heir of the Wilds to draw. Evolving Wilds comes into play. Now there's a replacement heir. I imagine Aaron wishing that was an untapped land, something that he could generate mana with very quickly because he does have 2 copies of Goblin Rabblemaster in hand.
And this is the cost of the Evolving Wilds and the mana base that Aaron's built here. It's not free.
Little scry action here for Carl with his Temple of Triumph. Going to consult the hand before figuring out if that's going to stay on the top or the bottom. Top it is. And now there's a Seeker and the passing of the turn. Barich's going to sacrifice that Evolving Wilds, fish out a mountain very quickly so he can turn on these red cards.
And now if Aaron draws land number 4, he has a turn of Rabblemaster plus Chain of the Rocks. Could be a very big tempo swing here, and if Carl doesn't have a sweeper available, Aaron could push really far ahead in the game.
Barich will draw. A land it is. Wooded Foothills. Another source of red mana too if he needs that. Shaman of the Great Hunt in hand as well. He'll start by sacrificing the Foothills. That's the easy part. There's the mountain.
Now, Shaman of the Great Hunt in hand, in theory, gives him an incentive to go for a second forest, so he has to have some sort of plan for the second red mana here.
Sure. There's the Rabblemaster. Goblin token incoming. 3 points of damage. Seeker the way out of the way. Thanks to Chain of the Rocks. Good turn there for Barich. We'll see if Hinkie can keep up. He'll untap and take a draw here on his 4th turn of the game. Battlefield Forge. Seeker the way with mana available. That'll maybe cause him to pump the brakes a little bit, though. Gather Courage is an interesting draw step.
I mean, Aaron can deploy a second Rabblemaster here, swing with everyone, and Gather Courage will likely be effective no matter how Carl blocks or uses removal.
Now Aaron is put in a little bit of a squeeze. That's why you see him lean back in his chair and think things through a little bit, because Carl has 4 mana. 1 more land, of course, we're in end hostilities territory, so how much can Aaron afford to extend here?
It's a good question, but he also can't afford to say go. And I think if he only attacks with what he has in play, if Carl has any sort of trick, Aaron's going to be stuck on the board. He's not going to be able to get the Seeker off the table. Carl's going to gain some life, and he's going to be forced to deploy more things anyway. So I think that this is a good spot to cast the Rabblemaster, leave Shaman as leftovers in your hand, assume that Gather Courage will be good enough to get you out of combat no matter how Carl uses tricks or blocks. And if he has end hostilities, at least you have something left over. And if Carl doesn't, you have a really commanding board.
Barich is going to give this a long thought.
It's a tough turn, you know, but I don't think Aaron can just send in what he has in play. It's too likely combat's a disaster.
I think so too.
I think he needs to do a little bit of a risk here.
Oh, he's just going to make a Goblin token. So not willing to deploy the other Rabblemaster. Though it looks like he's willing to send in with this Rabblemaster. And he is. So everybody into the red zone. We'll see how this line of play works out for him. Looks like there may be a raise the alarm involved here. And there is. So trigger prowess. Lifelink as well. Seeker's a 3/3. 2 soldier tokens.
Curious to see how Carl blocks. I think the most conservative block against Gather Courage is exactly this. It's Seeker in front of a token that's now a 3/3. So if Aaron wants to use the trick there, you get the Rabble Master off the table. Or he uses the Pump Spell on the Rabble Master, you get a token off the table, you gain 3 life, and you can untap and start using more removal spells.
It's a good block.
Yeah, I think if you respect Gather Courage, this is the best block for Carl.
Now, if I'm in Aaron's seat here, I think I'm casting Gather Courage on the Goblin token because I want the Seeker off the table.
Yeah, if Aaron's whole plan here is to not overextend into removal, he can't allow Carl to keep the Seeker because the Seeker plays defense too effectively against Aaron's board.
So there's the exchange in resources, and I think you have to probably follow up with the Rabble Master too. So I'm kind of with you. I think you just have to keep putting pressure on the board. If he has an hostilities, he just kind of has it.
Yeah.
Because, for example, if Hinkie's turn right now is Stoke the Flames, kill your Goblin Rabble Master, you're like, all right, perfect. Play my Shaman of the Great Hunt, get you for a bunch. And life is pretty good.
Though, if this was Aaron's play post-combat anyway, I think I would have preferred it pre-combat.
Sure. Just get some more stuff on the table.
For the reason that I mentioned, I feel like he was going to have his hand forced regardless.
Sure. Well, Carl's turn is a rather innocent one. It's just a Mystic Monastery and a passing of the turn. He's got 3 cards in hand, Treasure Cruise and land, and a copy of Raise the Alarm. Barich, he drew a copy of Chain of the Rocks. No good right now. Has Shaman of the Great Hunt in hand. He's going to trigger his Rabble Master and get into the red zone. Not willing to cast a Shaman just yet. It's time for more soldier tokens here from Hinkie.
And I think that Aaron just wants to hold this Shaman off in his hand as long as he possibly can.
4 points of damage will come through. Rabble Master's going to bite the dust. Trying to figure out the best spot for the Shaman. He's decided that's not it just yet. We're going to head back Carl's way. Carl will draw a card. It's a copy of Jeskai Charm. For mana, this is a Treasure Cruise. So 3 cards coming. 1's a Shivan Reef, 2 is a Temple of Triumph, 3 is a Mountain. Not the best Treasure Cruise we've ever seen. And by playing the Temple there, it means that the shields are kind of down. Wild Slash is still available, but I think this is where Aaron's probably going to pounce with the Shaman.
Possibly, though, again, he leaves himself really exposed in the event that End Hostilities is the follow-up here.
Sure.
He does have access this turn to just attacking and then playing Fleecemane Lion, which still adds to the board in the event that Carl doesn't have a sweeper, and is less valuable than the Shaman in the event that Carl untaps and hits him with the sweeper.
Well, here's the attack for 4.
I think that if Aaron drew a land that turn, you may see him push, because he's back in the spot where if Carl just untaps and has random removal spells, he can't win anymore.
Aaron not willing to add anything to the board that turn. How do you feel about that?
I think I would have deployed the Fleecemane Lion.
I just don't think the clock is fast enough at this point. I think he needs to deploy some other creature.
I think that if Aaron had 6 mana in play, I could see saying we're holding it all back, because in the event he gets hit with End Hostilities, he can untap and play both things. But since he's on a 1 or 2 turn delay for one of his threats anyway, I think that I would have played one of them.
Chain of the Rocks is going to go after that Monastery Mentor. This is a Jeskai Charm. That's going to put that on top of the deck, and now here comes a Monk token. So Heir of the Wilds will be Barich's draw step. Now is he willing to cast Shaman of the Great Hunt? The answer is no.
Well, I think based on that turn, you can pretty safely assume Carl does not have End Hostilities in hand.
Sure.
You may see Aaron be a little bit more aggressive here, at least deploy the Fleecemane Lion post-combat.
What makes this so interesting is the longer we go, the more of a chance that Hinkie actually has the opportunity to draw an End Hostilities. He doesn't have it now.
Exactly. Aaron can't wait all that long. And like I said, I think that this Fleecemane Lion is not worth very much as a follow-up here, because it's so slow, given that Aaron doesn't have enough mana in play to play everything left over in his hand in 1 turn.
Just a passing of the turn. You can see Hinkie's hand. There's not a lot going on there. Trying to represent some strength. And with a bunch of mana untapped and a Monk token in play, Wild Slash is going to take care of that Monk token. Here's the draw. Heir of the Wilds, of course. We all know that. But is Aaron willing to commit anything?
I think that's a spot where I would have preferred for Aaron to use the Wild Slash inside of combat there, because Carl may block, and use a removal spell on one of your tokens to try to get a prowess trigger and eat the other token. And in that case, you get to extract a removal spell on your token and frees up your Fleecebane Lion, your Heir of the Wilds, and so forth.
Barich's going to play Fleecebane this time. Here's the draw, Whirling Outburst. This will give Carl more time. Pretty good draw step. So 3 goblins on the way.
I think that Carl needs to play one of the lands in his hand here because one of his big draws is Treasure Cruise, and he needs to make sure that he can, you know, Treasure Cruise and then cast whatever he happens to draw off the top.
Barich very quickly draws. Already reaching for mana. Now here's a copy of Arc Lightning. Not
Pretty
bad.
solid.
Yeah. Here's the attack. It'll be for 5. That is going to do it. Aaron Barich is going to win this game and match over Carl Hinkie. 2 games to 1. Niagara will take care of Jeskai tokens. And for Barich, another great start to an Open Series event. We have seen him top 8 4 of these things, win 1 in Dallas in 2013. He's looking to get another title here in Houston.
And I feel for that matchup, Carl is really leaning on his sweepers. He's got 2 copies of Event Hostilities and Anger of the Gods and an Elspeth Suns champion that will count kind of as a sweeper in a lot of spots, but it was